All right, let's see here. Welcome everybody to another Ask Philip Live, our live Q&As that we do here in the Wits and Weights Facebook community. Today is July 19th, 2024. And we've got three really solid questions we're going to get into. Before we do some quick announcements, the first one is that I have a pinned post asking a simple question. And I love to hear from listeners on this because I'm going to feature your answers in episode 200. So just so you know, we've published over 300 episodes now. I think it was like 303 or something, including all the bonus episodes. But 200 of those, we're closing in on numbered episode 200, the full episodes. And if you're not aware of what's been going on with the show lately, I recently reduced the frequency to 3 episodes a week instead of 5. There will still be an occasional bonus episode where it makes sense, like a Q&A or a replay. If I was on another podcast, I want to share that. But it's 3 episodes a week. A solo episode on Monday, deep dive into nutrition science. A solo episode on Wednesday, which is applying engineering principles to your fitness and health. And then an interview on Fridays with small modifications over time. But I'd love to know from you, what is the most surprising thing that you've learned from the podcast? And it doesn't have to be mind-blowing, just something simple that you're like, ooh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I personally have learned a ton of things, especially talking to guests, listening to you, doing research, things like, for example, when I had, oh man, what's his name on? Now I can't remember. The guy, the anatomy guy, we talked about gut health. Geez, this is bad. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But he talked about how having a diversity of types of fibers, so for example, multiple types of apples, multiple types of squash, are good for your gut microbiome because the gut feed off different compounds in these different types of fibers. And the more diversity you have, the healthier microbiome you have. And a healthy gut leads to healthy everything else. So that's just one of many, many things I've learned. So what's the most surprising thing you've learned? I've got a handful of really good replies so far that are going to get featured, but I'd like a few more. And then if you want a shout out, I can do that. Otherwise, I'll keep it anonymous. Okay. Second announcement, and then we'll get into the questions, is this week's podcast episodes. If you missed them, the one from Monday was about my stair-step fat loss process. This is about how to approach fat loss over a little bit longer term with a lot more maintenance phases that could be more sustainable for some people who don't want to just be all out in fat loss. Then on Wednesday, I talked about something called rapid prototyping, which is something that you may not be spending enough time doing. You may be spending too much time planning and, dare I say, just tracking and researching, as opposed to doing this thing, which is rapid prototyping, to speed up your results. And then today's episode is an interview with Brittany and James Gatewood. Really solid interview where we talked all about getting ready for a bodybuilding show and what it takes to get super, super lean, like very lean and shredded. Whether you're doing it for a show or not, they are experts in that area, and they themselves have competed. So if you're interested in that, check it out. Yes, it's the extreme cost, and there are a lot of, I'll call them negatives or challenges, but there are also ways to do it that make it more achievable. We talk about in the episode. So check out the podcast, share it with a friend, follow, subscribe. Give me a 5-star review if you think if you think it deserves it. Okay, so today's questions, we have 3 really good questions I want to get into for Ask Philip. And remember, these go up every other week. So probably by Monday, you'll see the post for the next one. And you want to throw in your questions before we do the next live in 2 weeks. Okay, so the first question is from Karen. Now, Karen's also in our semi-private program, Wits and Weights Physique University, but she was kind enough to post a question here so others could learn the answer. We've sort of answered it separately in the community, but I'm going to give you an answer here as well. So her question is, am I doing too much? I've heard you talk about overtraining, but I keep thinking it doesn't apply to me. I strength train 5 days a week for 40 minutes. Okay, 5 days a week, 40 minutes, 10-minute warm-up. I walk 10,000 steps a day. On the weekend, I go for a longer walk, a bike ride, or a swim. Nothing strenuous. Sundays are my rest days. I'm in a fat loss phase. If my weight stalls, I tend to add more steps or cardio. All right, cool. So My my impression is your routine doesn't at all scream overtraining, just at first glance. I think training 5 days a week is fine for 40 minutes. It doesn't sound that long. It really depends on what your training looks like and how you recover. So, what I'm really going to ask you, Karen, and this just goes for anybody considering this question, is are you tracking your recovery, your performance, your biofeedback, and then we can get into the fat loss piece. And so if you're tracking your recovery, how's your sleep quality and quantity? Are you feeling fatigued and sore, or are you recovering just fine, right? Performance, are the lifts progressing? Now, in fat loss, they may not progress as quickly or even at all, but your relative strength might be going up as you're losing weight. Or do you keep hitting plateaus and failing reps? Your appetite, your mood, your sleep patterns, like everything that could tell us how your hormones are doing relative to your training and recovery, right? I'm basically saying, are you tracking these things and how are they doing? Because that's the only way I could answer the question, are you overtraining? Now, Karen, you have the physique and biofeedback tracker in Wits and Weights Physique University. So the biofeedback part of that is really helpful for telling you this information, where you track your hunger, your sleep, your stress, your digestion, your recovery, your energy, right? And your libido as well. All of that's in there. So by tracking it and seeing how it trends relative to your fat loss phase in your training, you'll be able to answer that question. Here's the thing. Overtraining is not about the just volume in general or absolute volume. It's, are you able to recover from that volume or from the stress? So if you're progressing well, if you're feeling good, if you're recovering, you're fine. But if you have all these other signs of overtraining, maybe you have to dial it back. And then with the fat loss, of course, the fact that you're in a calorie deficit is going to negatively affect your recovery, and you just have to be cognizant and manage it even more. And of course, when you said right here, if my weight stalls, I add more steps or cardio, that can work to a point. It's not always the answer, right? Because sometimes it can backfire. It could actually make you more hungry or impede your recovery. And what I would want to do there, I mean, more steps isn't the worst thing. Just walking more, as long as you're not forcing it and it feels like something enjoyable. Remember, we always have the nutrition dial. We always have the rate of loss dial. We could always go into a maintenance phase. So we could always get creative about these different things. But adding more steps can definitely work if you're not yet to the point where even that is too much, right? And we call it energy flux, right? Just kind of moving more so you could eat more, which I'm not against, because during fat loss, I'd rather you be able to eat more and have more energy for your training than just constantly cut the calories. But if you're going too quickly, Karen, if your rate of loss is too fast, that's another dial we can work on. Okay, next question, Josh. Now, Josh was on the podcast a long time ago talking about backcountry mountain goat hunting, right? Yeah, that's what we talked about. And he says in his question, Philip, you often discuss LISS cardio, so state cardio, which is like walking, as detrimental to muscle building and retention, and that makes sense. So just to clarify, hopefully I haven't given that impression, Josh. You know, I've maybe alluded to the fact that too much cardio, especially medium and high intensity cardio, could be detrimental to your recovery and your adaptations. But LISS cardio, generally you can do as much of that as you want. We're talking walking, right? Casual biking, things like that. So I just want to clarify that point. As you know, I train primarily for mountain hunting where I need strength and endurance. I run, bike, and stair climb along with weight training. How do I best balance the competing factors to be as strong and lean as I can while having the endurance to hike 10 plus miles a day in a steep, rugged terrain under heavy load? Okay, so first of all, I don't know if you heard the recent episode with Ben Lewis. He's in our group. I'm going to try to tag him here. He'd be a great guy to talk to. He runs 60 miles a week and he lifts weights and he's kind of balancing it all pretty effectively. I would reach out to him, man, and just have a conversation, go on Messenger or post right here. I'll tag him and go from there, because what you're trying to do is balance everything. And the first question I'm going to ask is, what do you care about most, right? And what does your schedule look like so that you can periodize your training? You want to have those blocks, right? The blocks, one block you focus on strength, another block where you focus on endurance, and whatever you're focusing on comes first. Even with that, as you know, the strength training may not be able to be as all out as it would for somebody who's like a physique athlete or just focused on lifting, in that You may not be doing a bodybuilding type program. You may be doing more of just strength, right? Compound lifts that translate well to hunting, which can include, yes, the big lifts, squats and deadlifts always, but also things like weighted carries, upper body pulls, right? Things that also include some endurance. There's also the aspect of specificity, right? Like I expect that you are actually doing the thing that you're training for, the hiking. And how do you support that hiking in the gym? Well, maybe there's a few movements that mimic the movement patterns. So one thing I heard recently was somebody who is a very similar type of hiker as you, and he was incorporating step downs, right? Loaded step downs from a box, as opposed to just step ups. Because stepping down, as you know, hiking, coming down, that can put a number on your joints, on your knees. So practicing that in the gym as well can help. So I think you're saying, like, as far as the cardio, I think you need to be well conditioned for what you do. And I think it's totally possible. There was a study that Bill Campbell reviewed, or multiple studies that Bill Campbell recently reviewed, where they looked at groups that had a lot of cardio versus little cardio, and they were both strength training, and they really didn't see any impact on their ability to gain muscle. However, it wasn't in advanced lifters, people who are advanced trained. So that's a kind of a gap in the literature. But I suspect that you could balance it all just fine, especially if you're conditioned for it. And now I'm going to tie your question to Karen's question. Are you tracking your biofeedback, your progress, your stress, your recovery? And what is that data telling you, right? Have you experimented with this? And what is that telling you? So hopefully that gives you enough to chew on. Talk to Ben, specificity, use periodization and prioritize what matters, and kind of block it out in your schedule leading up to your hiking event. And then collect the right data to tell you whether it's working or not. Okay, so then we have Emily. She says, best workouts to have after a little break: sickness, cold, travel, during fat loss, or she's in fat loss. That's her primary goal. She had a cold that turned into bronchitis. Oof, bronchitis is rough. And you said it healed, so good. Then you had a slew of work trips with varying degrees of gyms or times the gym was open. A lot of driving, so you were sitting down a lot. You were lifting 2 to 3 times a week with cardio twice a week. So that's awesome. You were like still pretty consistent getting to the gym. Now I'm going to be home again with gym access and some weights at home, just dumbbells. But again, I assume at the gym you have access to everything, including barbells and machines. I don't want to push it, but I want to get back into my workouts. Is there anything to be mindful of or prioritize? I do wear an Apple Watch, have a MyZone, shows my heart rate. Okay, so the Apple Watch and MyZone thing, I'm not worried about that. Your main question is, how do you get back to it? And here's where I'm going to give you the simple answer, and then I'm going to expand on it. The simple answer is just return to where you were last time you lifted before you got sick. What's interesting here is you got sick, but then you healed, and then you had some work trips. So I'm not sure what kind of break you're on right now. If you've only had like a week or two since the last time you went in the gym, that's not enough to even lose much strength or muscle mass at all. I mean, the tiniest bit. I would retry your last session and just move on. If you've had a much longer break, then you're probably detrained, and that's where you're going to probably drop the intensity a bit, but again, not excessively. I would start like at 80%, 90%, even 90%, but like 80% of where you were last time to test it out, and then see like, oh no, that felt really easy. I can jump up, or, ooh, that was intense. I definitely have detrained. I need to build back up to it. And everything else just is the same. Like, use progressive overload, prioritize compound lifts, and have good programming where you can progress over time. Train close to failure on most lifts. Focus on your technique and form. Listening to your body, right? All those things. I don't really have much else to add to that, because you said best workouts to have after a little break. I would get back to your normal strength training program and just drop the intensity as needed, but don't use that as an excuse to drop it so much when you don't have to do that. Besides that, sleep, managing your stress. If you still have any symptoms or are dealing with illness of any kind, I'd like you to get out of fat loss during those phases and like fully eat at maintenance or more to recover. But it sounds like you're recovered and you just want to get back into it. So get back into it. If I didn't answer your question, if there was some other nuance or context that you were really looking for, comment on this video and just say, oh no, this is really what I need to know. Or you can say, yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. If you're looking for a reason to like do mobility and flexibility work and stretching and kind of slowly ease back into lifting, you're not going to get it from me because you don't need to. Like jump right back into it. If you were a total beginner and never lifted before, what would you do on day one? I'd have you squat, deadlift, bench, right? And just do it light, and then you're going to work up to it. So work within your abilities, but then start pushing hard and going after it. All right, that's it for today's Ask Philip. If you enjoyed this, give me a heart, a like, comment below. The more engagement on a post, the more people see it, and it helps the algorithm and all that fun stuff. And then take advantage of the next Ask Philip when it's posted, and I will answer your question. This is exclusive to our community. Rarely, if ever now, do I take these questions and post them on the podcast or anything. So you got to be in here, take advantage of it, ask your questions. Have a great weekend, everyone. Keep lifting, keep using that mind, keep listening to the podcast and engaging our community. We're here to help you out. That's it. Talk soon.